just bizarro behavior. Okay, hi everybody. Thanks for coming back if you've been here before, or hi, welcome if you're new. My name's Mickey. I'm a therapist and we talk about therapy things on this channel. Today, we are talking about the boy mom phenomenon. There's a lot of discussion about this topic, but also a lot of nuance here. So hang with me. Some of the things I'm going to say are probably going to make you mad, but I think it's a conversation worth having. So we're diving into that today. There's a whole lot for us to unpack here. So get a snack, get a drink, and settle in. Okay, before we get started, I want to be super clear from the jump that there is nothing inherently wrong with being a mom to boys or being a boy mom. I know that a lot of people find joy and also community in, like the collective joys and struggles of parenting children of varying genders. And I'm not here to tell you that you're not allowed to do that. This is not about that. I'm also not asserting that all people who just so happen to be moms to boys are this way. However, I think I would be remiss if we didn't address this phenomenon because there's just a lot of troubling trends that go along with especially hashtag boy mom on places like TikTok and Instagram. And so we're talking about that today because it's an actual thing. There is a real term for this. And there's a lot of harmful consequences of behaving the way that these moms are behaving. So we're going to kind of break this down into sections. So let's talk about what the boy mom thing actually is. For those of you who are not aware, this is a pattern that happens most often, or a trend that happens most often with moms to boys, which is another caveat and disclaimer, by the way. This does happen with people of other varying gender situations, but the situation is essentially that a parent behaves inappropriately with a child in an emotional sense, and then sometimes films it and puts it on the internet. So this is kind of a shitty offshoot of the family vlogging situation. If you don't know, by the way, I'm very much not a fucking fan of family vlogging channels. I'll put the link to that video up here because we've talked about it on the channel before. However, this is kind of an offshoot of that because, again, basically what we're seeing is an erosion of the appropriate boundaries between a parent and child, and a lot of that is also being glorified in this way as if to say that it's cute and sweet. Oftentimes these are videos that are played with some kind of romantic song underneath and this poetic text and a filter over the top, and it's just all icky and weird fucking vibes. I'm going to show you examples as we move through today's video. The first one that I want to draw your attention to is one that got a lot of attention when this issue first kind of kicked off and gained more public awareness. We're a little bit late to the jump here, but it's fine. So I'm going to show you that TikTok now. Really quick, the person who made this TikTok, Anna Saccone, is one half of the Saccone Jolie family vlogging channel. They have been the family vlogging channel that exploits their kids' reviews for a really long time. So no surprises there that there's some problematic takes coming out of the family. But just so that everybody's aware, part of the reason that I'm showing you these TikToks is also because they've gained a lot of attention. I'm not in the business of invading people's privacy. All the TikToks that I'm going to show you today are either from established influencers who have chosen to put themselves in the limelight or people who've gone viral. So we're going to talk about Anna Saccone first.
I never thought that I would be that toxic boy mom. I love my 4 kids equally, but that last little boy just hits different. And now I feel like I'm having this existential crisis. Before I wouldn't be that mom, that toxic boy mom. He hits his sisters, he punches them. I'm maybe he's having a hard day. So when I think about my daughters getting married, I get excited, right? Think about their dresses, planning their weddings. When I think about my son's wedding, I want to cry. Boy moms, we got to step up. We got to realize that we are the problem.
So this is what I'm talking about. It's sort of glamorized in this way. This video specifically is meant to paint this in a way as if it's funny and humorous. And first of all, it's fucking not. It's really weird. But there's a couple of things that I want to point out here. First of all is the rampant favoritism. This is a feature of this boy mom phenomenon where there's usually a favorite child, especially for moms who happen to be moms to children of varying genders. There's often this favoritism of the boys and this presentation of them as the golden child and they can do no wrong. I'm going to be super clear. I don't think we need to say this. At least I thought we didn't need to say this. But letting your children get away with physically harming the other children is not okay. That's super fucking weird that you would make a joke out of that. It's also really inappropriate and really fucking mean. The other common aspect of this toxic boy mom trend is the inappropriate involvement and emotional attachment that these mothers experience to their son's tension, to their future, and especially this seemingly competitive attitude towards your children's future romantic relationships. This idea that like thinking about what my daughters are going to look like, thinking about my daughter's weddings makes me happy, and thinking about my son's wedding makes me want to cry is really fucking inappropriate. And this is what I'm talking about, right? Like this inappropriate amount of investment and involvement and this kind of blurring of the lines that's happening here is why we're making this video. I, generally speaking, want to talk about the concepts of emotional incest, or covert incest is what it's also called, because a lot of people don't necessarily understand this phenomenon to be distinct from physical and sexual incest and like the inappropriate crossing of boundaries that happens between parents and children in a sexual and physical way. The assumption is usually that those things all happen all at the same time, or that they're mutually inclusive, and that's not necessarily true. It's entirely possible for emotional incest or covert incest to be occurring without any physical abuse taking place, but it is just as harmful, and it's really important for us to talk about. One last thing that I want to talk about as just like a general feature of the boy mom thing also is that there is usually this attitude that the children are responsible for the adult's well-being. This often looks like moms positioning their sons to be a confidant, to be a peer, and sometimes a lot of the verbiage that people use is moms raising sons that they wish to like be the husband that they never had. This is a very common feature of this issue, and it's really, really damaging. We're going to kind of go through like a list basically of all of the fucked up things that can happen to your fucking kids when you're doing this to them. And I'm also going to show you some examples as we do that. So let's get started with that. Okay, the first thing that I want to talk about that is a rampant feature of this weird phenomenon is when moms make their sons responsible for their past emotional wounds. This is something that's probably the most common feature of these TikToks and these posts and these videos that I've seen in doing research for this. RIP to my algorithm, by the way. You're welcome. My YouTube and TikTok algorithm thinks that I am a conservative Christian fundamentalist who is obsessed with my son. So you're welcome for that. But this feature is again, it's very common in a lot of these videos. I'm going to show you some examples here in a second. But a lot of the subtext here is usually that it's the child's job to parent their parent. We've talked about parentification on the channel before. I'll put that video up here. This is kind of like a shitty, like to the nth degree version of parentification, because essentially what happens in these TikToks, let me show you one right now and then we'll talk about it. Let's watch this one first.
They say that if God gives you a son, it's because you deserve to know what true love is. He must have known what he was doing when he gave me two.
Like fucking hello? Real quick, there's another one that's also relevant. For those of you who can't read that, by the way, it says, reasons I love being a boy mom, I will be his first true love. All of this is a very common thing, even outside of the like boy mom, family vlogging, influencer sphere of the internet. This is a thing that people say about their children, just like generally in like regular ass Facebook and Instagram posts. And I really want to encourage people to fucking stop this, right? First of all, if you've never experienced true love by the time that you have a child, that's morally neutral and fairly common. That's okay. That's not shameful or bad or wrong. And also, the vehicle through which you are going to achieve healing and progress around that issue is not by making your son your one true love. That's so fucking inappropriate. And I didn't think that this needed to be said, but apparently it does. No parent or child is ever going to be each other's one true love. That's fucking weird. That's not normal, right? When children are little and they don't understand the differences or like the norms of romantic relationships between people, it's common for kids to do the thing where they say like, I want to grow up and marry my mommy, or I want to, I'm never going to move away from home because I love you guys so much, right? And like, this is cute, right? It's part of like the childlike innocence of not really understanding what relationships are. But the work in being a healthy and safe parent is in reminding and encouraging your child that like, we love you and we love that you love us so much. And also, isn't it so exciting that one day you will have people in your life that you love just as much as us, maybe more than us. And that's something that like we want to be reinforcing that value in our kids rather than feeding into this, because it's just fucking plain unhealthy and it's also weird. It's weird and gross. I just really want to underline the fact that this is not an appropriate norm to set up for kids, because again, not having experienced true love, morally neutral, that's totally fine. If your relationships up to this point have just been not satisfactory, there's grief work around that. It's difficult to do. And also, again, the work in resolving that is by finding true love, by finding connection, by finding safety in your romantic relationships with other adults. Because this is the other key part of this that's really important to honor here, is that besides the fact that it's quite literally incestuous, which is bad, like I don't think I need to justify or like give a fucking reason why incest is bad, but it also robs kids of their ability to like effectively consent in this, right? Kids don't understand what informed consent is, and it's your job as an adult to teach them about that. And when you abuse your relationship as an authority figure in their life to force them to participate in this norm with you that is not appropriate, that is really gross, and that will also damage their development and their concept of relationships and their concept of self, you are being abusive to your child. The thing that I really want to drive home about this is that it's just not appropriate for parents to expect that their children will heal their wounds, right? We all, even if we're not parents, throughout the course of our lifetime, will be wounded, will develop hurt, will experience traumas. Again, morally neutral. I'm a therapist. I'm not going to shame anybody for experiencing trauma or having difficulties. But again, it's very important that we work through that with other adults who've consented to participate in that process and who are safe people for that. We're going to talk in detail later about the impacts of these norms on the children. But for what it's worth, this particular norm, this like making your kids responsible for your healing and like raising your children to be the man that you wish you were married to thing can oftentimes cause kids to, or, kids can cause these kids to reject their own needs and to prioritize the needs of others, especially because they learn this message from a very young age that it's more important that my mom is happy than I'm happy. And also that I need to do everything that I can to keep her happy because I'm her only source of happiness. This is a really inappropriate norm to set up in relationships, and it can mean then that their attachment and their ability to have safe connection with other people as an adult is fundamentally hindered. And that's work that they'll likely have to do on themselves with a therapist to be able to find like a true feeling of safety and security in relationships because you've robbed them of that in their childhood. For what it's worth, as an offshoot, I think there's an interesting commentary to be made here about the phenomenon of this existing within cis-het relationships. Don't get me wrong, I'm the last person on planet Earth to say that all cis-het relationships are bad or wrong or that there's something inherently terrible about them, because that's not true. However, I think it is disingenuous to say that there is not a norm and a stereotype associated with these relationships, particularly amongst people who have repressed parts of themselves and their identity development for fear of being rejected or shamed by conservative or Christian ideals, for example, and that manifesting in poor outcomes in these relationships. It's not uncommon necessarily for these very repressive, very conservative, very traditional cis-het relationships between a cis man and a cis woman to have an inequity in household labor, in emotional connection and maturity, and for these wives generally to be feeling neglected and not seen by their partners. But first of all, this is a systemic issue that needs to be addressed at a culture level. But second of all, if you're feeling that in your relationship, please know that you're very valid and you are allowed to feel that way. And that the work to do in that is either with your partner by having some potentially very uncomfortable conversations about how this is not working for me and we need to figure out a workaround, and or I'm not choosing to be in relationship with people who don't make me feel seen. Using your child as a surrogate for the problems that exist in your relationship is never an appropriate solution. And while I can very much empathize with the difficulties that come along with being subjected to systemic oppressions and issues in your relationships, again, the solution is not to coerce a child who lacks the agency and autonomy to say no to heal your wounds for you. Okay, the second thing that I want to talk about is the reversal of traditional roles in the parent and child dynamic. For those of you who are not aware, there's like norms that are supposed to exist in terms of the roles that parents and children inhabit. Generally speaking, parents are supposed to be parents and children are supposed to be children. I think this is like a pretty well agreed upon dynamic. But again, a lot of this video is filled with stuff that I'm like, I didn't think anybody needed to say this out loud, but clearly it needs to be said. A lot of the dynamics that exist in this like sort of toxic boy-mom arrangement are what we talked about earlier a little bit, which is that the child ends up kind of parenting the adult. A lot of this looks like a lack of emotional maturity on behalf of the moms. I'm going to show you a TikTok here in a second where mom is acting very childlike and also reinforcing this message that you will be punished for setting boundaries with me and or I will guilt you for setting boundaries with me. This is kind of a hallmark of this arrangement. Also, if you notice this happening either in your own relationship with your children or in somebody that you love's relationship with their children, this is something to be aware of because, again, part of developing healthy relationships as an adult is feeling empowered and safe to set healthy boundaries around our time, our attention, our affection, our bodies, et cetera, et cetera. And a lot of this dynamic reinforces this belief that I, as the mom, am the child who needs to be caretaken. And so therefore it is your job to attend to my emotional wants and needs first and foremost. And if there's leftover, then you can have that. And like most often, really, it's not even that. To be clear, a lot of this is sourced from TikTok because they're short and it's easier to make the point with these. So let me show you this and then we'll talk about it. Just bizarro behavior. This is what I'm referring to, right? I know, obviously, I think the comment section on this video is filled with a lot of like, it's a joke, but like, it's not though. Is it a joke? Because if it was a joke, you wouldn't have made it. And also like the fact that we're doing this, that this idea got pitched and we set up a tripod and lighting and we did all of this, we rehearsed this, indicates to me that this isn't just like a funny haha off the cuff joke. Like we planned this and that's weird. This attitude that like I'm gonna guilt you, I'm gonna quite literally hang off of your leg, trying to make you feel guilty as though you're wounding me or betraying me, is a hallmark of this issue. The thing that I want to draw people's attention to here is that a lot of the subtext around this behavior is that you setting boundaries is a betrayal to me, right? We talked about this in the Duggar family video. I'll link that up here if you haven't watched that. But a lot of the enmeshment and like inappropriate merging of boundaries that happens here can cause kids to have a difficulty in advocating for themselves as adults. And the thing that really sucks about this is that in adult relationships, these kids will often be people pleasers. They'll struggle to even know what their own wants and needs are, let alone communicate them effectively to a partner. And this can lead to a lot of resentment. This can lead to a lot of lying, a lot of deception, a lot of like hiding, sometimes compulsive behaviors, and oftentimes a lot of resentment for the partner because they feel as though they're never allowed to advocate for themselves. They feel as though their wants and needs are never prioritized, and they feel like they're constantly put at the bottom of the heap. And a lot of this harkens back to this time in childhood where their wants and their needs and their emotional needs were neglected and not attended to. And that's the other thing about this that especially pushes my fucking buttons as a clinician, is that when parents do this, even if you are meaning it as a joke, like first of all, it's not funny, but second of all, essentially what you're doing is emotionally abandoning your child. This can lead to like very real abandonment issues as an adult. This can oftentimes look like a fear of intimacy or connection, and a difficulty with consistent long-term relationships because of this fear that like my needs are not going to be attended to. And I think a lot of people misunderstand this about trauma. We as a culture like to perpetuate this myth that trauma only looks like, you know, big events, things like war, natural disaster, being assaulted. And I want to be clear, those are very much traumatic and that's a very real issue. And trauma, especially repeated childhood trauma, doesn't necessarily look like that, right? And so having a parent behave this way towards you in childhood is traumatic and will inform this view about yourself and about relationships and the world. And just because someone didn't explicitly say to you, your needs don't matter, my needs matter more than yours, doesn't mean that as a child you're not absorbing that value about relationships. A lot of what we learn about relationships and ourselves and the world is from our parents and our families in childhood, and a lot of it is taught through implication, right? Rarely, if ever, are we sitting down with our kids and having conversations about our overarching views about the world and our role within that, but more so we're absorbing that by watching people behave and learning from example and learning by how things are just structured and how things are in our family and in our home. And so setting up this norm as a thing that's like, first of all, normal, but second of all, funny is really, really inappropriate. And again, even if you think it's a joke, it's not going to be taken as a joke by your child's nervous system because their fundamental desire to survive can't tell the difference between whether you're joking or not. If it's happening often enough, you're going to harm your child by doing this. Along with that, we've kind of already touched on this a little bit, but for the sake of being thorough, along with that is the boundary violations issue that obviously exists between parent and child in this dynamic. The attitude that you will be your child's everything is really inappropriate, right? I really want to discourage people from fucking platform this. It's not normal. It's also not true, right? We talked about this in the Duggar video, again, link up there. But the work in being a healthy and safe and effective parent is in allowing your children to develop into the person that they are, rather than trying to be the person or trying to force them to be the person that you think they should be. Ideally, healthy healthy and, quote unquote, successful parenting looks like taking this sort of guiding role where we're allowing our child to discover genuinely, authentically who they are, what matters to them, where they want their life to go, what they want their relationships to look like, and how you fit into that, right? The expectation that you will be your child's first true love and their best friend and their whole world, and you'll always be a part of their life forever is, first of all, a fallacy. That's not actually true. But second of all, sets up a really inappropriate dynamic when we talk about boundaries. The truth is that it's important for kids to have some level of separation between parents and child, and also between their family of origin and themselves, right? The goal, again, of healthy parenting is to allow this person to become who they are and then eventually separate from their family of origin to become a distinct and separate entity. They're allowed and encouraged and empowered to make their own choices about their life's journey and their goals and their direction and all of those things. When we tell our kid that you are my everything, I am your everything, you're limiting their ability to do that. And a lot of this, again, is done through the covert use of guilt and shaming by saying, if you individuate from our family, that you're betraying me, which sucks. We've already talked about that. But also, again, this attitude that like, I will be everything to you and you will be everything to me is simply not true. And it's also just not how relationships work, right? For any of us who have friendships, romantic relationships, family relationships, acquaintances, whatever, we all know that all of those different types of relationships serve somewhat slightly different purposes. Right? The emotional and sexual and romantic gratification and joy and connection and care and affection and compassion that I receive from my life partner is not the same kind of connection that I'm going to receive from my best friend or from my mom or from my coworkers. And that's for good reason. Being somebody's whole entire world and everything and always is not a healthy dynamic to set up, not only because that's not just how it doesn't fucking work that way, but also because it's literally impossible. Like, no one can do that. That's a Herculean feat and you're setting yourselves up for failure. So like on all accounts, I really want to discourage people from doing this. I'm going to show you a TikTok right now. We'll talk a little bit about it after this is done.
You'll be his first kiss, his first love, his first friend. You are his mom, and he is your whole world. He is your little boy.
No, this is inappropriate. Along with this, I want to point out that it's not healthy for parents to view their children in any capacity, regardless of the gender makeup or orientation here. It's not healthy for any parent to view any of their children as their whole world. The truth is that parenting is a part of our identity, oftentimes a large part, especially when children are small, because they're very demanding. That's normal. That's okay. And it's also really gratifying for a lot of people to have that be a large part of their identity. And you're a person, right? You're a whole ding dang complex person who deserves to have hobbies and interests and relationships and parts of your personhood that aren't being swallowed whole by parenting. I want to super validate that parenting can feel like it swallows you whole sometimes. And a lot of people do oftentimes have to do work, grief work, growth work after children are old enough to kind of individuate and separate a little bit about discovering their own identity, about discovering their relationships again. There's lots of normal stuff that happens there, and that's very okay. And also, I really want to encourage people to push back on this rhetoric that being a parent is your whole entire identity, because that's not true. And it's also not healthy, not only for you, but also for your kids. Again, this places a really disproportionate burden on the shoulders of your children to be everything to you. And that's not fair to them. Their role in life is not to please you or to give you something to live for, but to be cared for and nurtured by you. You brought them here, or you agreed to care for them in some form or fashion. And your job, again, is to be a healthy and safe parent for them, and ultimately give them like a safe landing place to like lift off and like move on to other things. Parenting should not be your whole life for your whole life. The other thing that I want to talk about in regards to this like inappropriate boundary thing is the like daughter-in-law thing that seems to come up with this a lot. I don't think I was able to save the TikTok that I saw of this. I don't think I could find it at the time that we're recording this, but there was a TikTok of a mom saying that I'm raising my sons to love me more so that when they grow up that they don't go to their daughter-in-law's house for Christmas. And this is like a lot of the rhetoric that's used in these spaces. I'm going to show you a TikTok right now. There probably won't be any audio on it because I think the song will get copyrighted, probably on a few of these actually. But this is like very much the general theme here. So let me show you this and then we'll talk about it. It actually gives me chills, like how creepy and unnerving this is. This is not cute. I want to be super fucking clear. It's weird. No parent should have an attachment like this to their children. It's just not appropriate. But anyways, back to the daughter-in-law thing. This is a common theme in this like toxic boy mom issue. We talked about this with the Anna Saccone TikTok also. The thing that I want to point out about this is, again, like the individuation and separating from family of origin is very important. We've already talked about this. But along with this, that this oftentimes creates a power struggle between the mother-in-law and the daughter-in-law that's not fun for anyone. And I just really think it's important to point this out because regardless of like how we end up in this situation, the end result is oftentimes that the son or the man in this situation, if they're an adult with a, adult partner, hopefully, ends up feeling ripped in half, right? Especially because these dynamics oftentimes have existed for the child's entire life. And so there is a sense of loyalty and a sense of enmeshment, a feeling of like, if my mom's feelings are hurt, then my feelings are hurt. And then feeling ripped in half by a life partner, which is very normal for a life partner to want to experience attention, affection, compassion, priority, even over their partner's mother, and the mother kind of ripping this person in half. It's very, very overwhelming. And ultimately the end result of this is the child, the boy in this situation, with man, I guess, whatever, you get it, feeling as though there's no winning. And again, I just really want to point this out because this power struggle often is so very ego driven. And it also comes from the scarcity mindset. Again, we already talked about the problematic norms that exist in some cishet relationships. And again, if you're feeling unsatisfied, uncared for by your life partner, it's not appropriate for you to seek that care and compassion from your son. And so setting up this power dynamic where we're mean and rude and passive aggressive to your daughter-in-law, usually, obviously it does hurt the daughter-in-law's feelings. I'm sure people are people and that's hurtful, but oftentimes, more often than not, what you're doing is hurting your son actually. And because of this very selfish pursuit of needing to be taken care of, when ultimately you would be much better off by seeking the help of a licensed professional clinician to help you work through whatever it is that's happening for you to cause you to feel drawn to this dynamic. For what it's worth, this can also result in relational issues later in life. If the child does successfully partner, we have the power struggle thing like you talked about, but if they don't manage to successfully partner to another person, this can mean then that they struggle to find a connection or community because of this, right? Because you've hindered their ability to feel safe, to feel allowed, to connect effectively, to attach to other people. And like, first of all, that's your fault. That's really shitty and you shouldn't do that to your kid. But second of all, this then presents a problem with like, what do we do now, right? Like you've robbed your child of the ability to feel safe, to connect to other people. And so now they spend the duration of their life alone because they're attending to you. Like there's no orientation of this situation that's safe or that's compassionate or kind to your child. And like generally speaking, again, 0 out of 10, don't fucking recommend. I think we've also kind of touched on this already, but I do really want to draw attention to the like romantic boundary blurring that happens here. It is very common for this to exist where the parent in this arrangement makes their child responsible for these really heavy emotional disclosures. Oftentimes it's a divulging of being unhappy in their relationship, these deep traumas or like big feelings that adults are having that they then sort of place in this child's lap. And regardless of how old the child is, I do want to be super clear that this is inappropriate. I think it goes without saying that when they're little, this is really inappropriate. But even if your child is a teenager or an adolescent or young adult, this is still very inappropriate, not only because it's not their burden to bear and this is not something that they consented to participate in, but also because it's just developmentally inappropriate. Even teenagers and young adults are not equipped to deal with the deep-seated emotional struggles of their parents because the role between parent and child is not meant to be as like a client or a therapist and a client, right? Like that's not appropriate. And it really will do a number on your kid's sense of attachment, not only to you, but again, to other people, to have this heavy emotional disclosure dropped in their lap when they don't have the skills or the autonomy or the agency to really effectively do anything about it. Essentially, you're forcing your kid to sit with this trauma and this anxiety and this fear and then to do nothing with it. They're stuck with it. They can't fix it. They feel very overwhelmed by this. And you're basically just emotionally dumping all of this stuff in your kid's lap and forcing them to sit with that forevermore until they develop into adults and find the resources to then offload that, which is, again, not a kind or compassionate or safe thing to do as a parent. The last thing that I want to talk about in regards to the boy mom thing is the favoritism that happens. We touched on this a little bit at the beginning, but the favoritism that often exists in these families is really a problem, not only for the other kids, but also for the child that's being upheld as the golden child. I could make a whole video about family dynamics and family roles. If you guys want me to talk about that, I can do that. But for the sake of this video being somewhat succinct, think the golden child dynamic is really, really harmful because first of all, it teaches all of your other kids that they're less than, that they're not good, that they're a problem, that they are less worthy of love. And that really does a number on their self-esteem. But this also is problematic for the golden child, the one that's being held up as like the perfect example, because it puts a lot of pressure on them to like never fail, always be good, never hurt anyone's feelings, always be perfect, never let anyone down. And the moment that you expose yourself as being fundamentally human, like the fucking rest of us, I will revoke my love and compassion from you for doing that. This is a crushing weight to place on a child. And again, goes without saying, this is going to have a ripple effect into their relationships in their adult life, even their relationship with themselves. This is a really heavy self-esteem wound to carry around, feeling as though your sense of worthiness and love in relationships is conditional upon you never hurting anyone's feelings and always being good and never letting anyone down. And it teaches children that love as a concept is dependent upon them being worthy enough for it, which is I think it goes without saying that that's fucking problematic. As an addendum to the end of this video, I also want to point out that this does happen with girl dads. I think we are seeing a little bit less of this representation on social media, likely because men don't use social media in the way that women do. And so I think it's really important to remember that, because just because we're not seeing it necessarily represented as rampantly on social media does not mean that it's not happening. The very first example that came to mind for me when I was doing this video is the like ownership over my daughter's genitals thing that happens a lot. The like, baby onesies with things like my dad owns a shotgun, like that are being sold as if they're cute or funny. And actually it's just really fucking weird, right? So I want to recap a little bit of that and talk about how that might look when, again, the gender orientation is like shifted a little bit, but it does go without saying that all the shit that we already talked about does go, it's the same, regardless of whether the child is a boy or a girl or assigned male or female at birth. You get it. Okay, I have a couple of TikToks that I want to show you as Exhibit A, so I'm going to play you those and then we'll talk about it.
I want to crash my car into a telephone pole, standing on the gas with no seatbelt on. I can't handle it. It makes me absolutely.
For those of you who can't read this, it says, "This is how my husband acts when he realizes someday my daughter will rely on another man." Hello? Like, again, there's a lot to unpack in regards to this. First of all, if men are aware that other men are problematic and unsafe fucking people, why are you not participating in challenging these patriarchal and misogynistic beliefs that endanger women and femme and AFAB people? Why? Like, what the fuck? That's fucking weird. You should not have to have a daughter or a wife or an aunt or a cousin that you really care about in order to care about the safety of people who are affected by misogyny. And if it does require you to have skin in the game in terms of like knowing someone specifically in order to care about a cause, then you don't actually care about the cause and you're also just fucking selfish. So that sucks. But besides this, I do just really want to highlight again the fact that there is an inappropriate and enmeshed attachment here between a parent and a child that lends itself to this really problematic dynamic wherein, especially with the girl and or the girl dad thing, where like I have to be the one who protects my daughter from all of the dangers of the world and who will prevent her from being taken advantage of by a man. And like, again, first of all, if you only care about misogyny as it relates to the people that you know, that sucks. But on top of that, I lost my train of thought because somebody went into the bathroom. But on top of that, I think it's important to highlight that as parents, our work is in teaching and, educating children about how to care for, how to advocate for, how to empower themselves, so that we as adults, when they become adults, don't have to constantly be looking over their shoulder to make sure that they're not making the wrong decision, that you're not doing the wrong thing, that you're not in the wrong place at the wrong time with the wrong people. If you have done your job successfully as a parent, your child will be able to advocate for themselves, to protect themselves, to make informed and educated and conscientious decisions about their relationships, their time, their attention, their affection, their community, etc., etc. And if you are positioning yourself as the authority figure who will always have to gatekeep your child's interaction with the rest of the world for the rest of your life, not only are you a bad fucking parent, but you're also a busybody that's probably going to damage the relationship between you and your child, because ultimately people as like a concept, I guess, want to be independent. We want to be autonomous. We want to feel as though we are trusted by the folks that we're in relationship with. And so, like, again, generally speaking, 0 out of 10, none of this is going to lend itself to positive outcomes later in adulthood. And especially with this arrangement. It also prioritizes or centers the experiences of men, which will do a number on your daughter's self-esteem, forcing her to again and again center the emotions, the thoughts, the feelings of men in her life will ultimately place her in a position of more danger than if you processed all of your own problematic baggage and allowed her to make her own decisions about her life as an adult, and also provided her with the tools and the guidance and the training to do all of that effectively as she ages. There's a couple more TikToks that I want to play with you, so I'm going to play you 2 back to back and then we'll talk about those. I'm going to read you this one as we go, actually. This says, me to my daughter, are you at your boyfriend's house again? Her, yeah, we are alone in his room. Me, you better not be. Her, we are making out. Me, what? Her, Dad, I am in my room. I truly do not understand what the fucking purpose of this TikTok is, but I do just want to draw attention to the fact that a whole ass grown adult man sat down again with his phone, set up a tripod or propped his phone up on something, made sure that the lighting was good, wrote a little script for this video, pressed record, and then made this whole video where we're fantasizing about your ability to exert your control over your daughter's autonomy and relationships and ultimately her genitals. Wow, like that's super fucking weird. I think this is a through line in these dynamics, regardless of, again, what the gender makeup is here. This fantasizing that we're doing about our child and their genitals and their future sexual relationships and our ability to exert our control over that is really fucking inappropriate. And if anything, just speaks to a lack of emotional maturity, a lack of agency and autonomy, and a lack of security in ourselves and our relationships that really ought to be addressed with the therapist. You should really leave your kids the fuck alone. There's just no way out of this situation that doesn't make this whole thing feel weird and like a trauma soup of poor boundaries and inappropriate role reversal that's going to lead to negative outcomes in your child's future relationships. Along with this, I wanted to point out too, in the girl dad scenario specifically, the promoting of violence, like the glorification of violence in regards to like dad beating up their daughter's boyfriend or whatever, also further serves to cement this attitude in your daughter's worldview that men are inherently violent and that they will be violent to her if she displeases them, which is super fucking dangerous and problematic. It's not funny. It's not cute. And again, the learning that we do on a cellular and body level as a child is difficult for us to understand the caveats there, right? Your daughter doesn't learn men are inherently violent and they will harm me if I displease them, except for dad or except for, this boyfriend or except for that person. They're really good. What she learns is this as a whole, right? And so that is going to sow seeds of fear and hypervigilance and overwhelm. And as if that's not already enough of a fucking problem in the world that we're living in, we really don't need to be cementing that by teaching our daughter that you, as an adult man, are a fundamentally unsafe person and are liable to fly off the handle and be violent towards her or the people that she loves if they so happen to displease you. This is just a problematic fucking situation to be. Whatever, you get it. I know that was a lot, and I'm sure that there is stuff that I missed. Please feel free to put stuff in the comments if you guys have thoughts or feelings about this. I feel like you guys educate me just as much as I educate you on this channel, and I love that for us, honestly. So let me know if you guys have thoughts or feelings about this. Again, if you are a child who has survived one of these dynamics, I do want to express, first of all, my sincerest condolences. This is a really difficult situation to have survived, but also please know that you are very much not alone in this, right? Especially, this is one of the positive things about social media is that we as a community are able to give language to these things that previously we might have thought like this is a me thing, right? And rarely, if ever, is that true. There are lots and lots of people who've had experiences like this, and you're not alone in that, and you are so incredibly worthy of being validated and heard and seen and given the time and space to process through all of that, because this sucks. No one should ever fucking do this to their kids. And there are always links in my description also if you want to find a therapist of your very own to help you work through that if you've got some stuff coming up for you. So if you guys like the video, we do stuff like this. Do stuff like this. We also talk about an educational moment, pop culture moment, so I'd love to have you stay for that. And then share the video to help the channel grow and to help each other grow, and I will see you guys next Saturday. Okay, bye.